What kills a narcissist isn't your anger, it's the moment you disappear in silence. It's not the yelling, not the long messages full of hurt, and not the times you forgave only to be betrayed again. What they truly cannot endure is when you leave no trace in their world, no reaction, no explanation, not even a single tear for them to exploit, only cold silence, yet silence that carries incredible power. For most people, a breakup is a time of grief, reflection, and maybe regret. But for a narcissist, your silence is a death sentence for the fragile ego they've clung to their whole life. Because all of their worth doesn't come from within, it comes from the emotional reactions they can squeeze out of you. When you're angry, they feel powerful. When you cry, they feel valuable. When you forgive, they believe they still control you. But when you go silent, everything falls apart. The moment you stop reacting, they fall into a void. No echo to prove they still matter, no reflection to keep their fake self alive. And for them, it's not just losing a relationship, it's losing the entire illusion they built to survive. In their eyes, you are always just a supporting actor in a play where they starred as the lead. But when you quietly step off stage, their whole story collapses. No script, no characters to control, no audience to witness their performance. And that terrifies them more than any breakup ever could. For you, silence may be a hard-won decision after months of struggle and pain, but silence isn't running away. It's the clearest sign of emotional maturity and inner strength. It's the moment you realize you don't need to argue to be understood, don't need to beg to prove your worth, and don't need to react just to show you still care. You choose silence, and that choice is the fatal blow to their ego. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the narcissist's mind to uncover why silence becomes their worst nightmare, what really happens inside when you walk away without looking back, and most importantly, why your silence isn't weakness, but the ultimate victory, proof of the freedom, peace, and strength you've reclaimed. If you've ever been caught in the cycle of a narcissist's manipulation, if you're on the journey of healing and reclaiming your self-worth, stay with me until the end of this video, because you'll see silence isn't the ending. It's the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where you live for yourself, free from control and no longer defined by anyone else. And before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can join us on future journeys. Each week, we'll uncover more of the hidden corners of psychology, not just to escape toxic relationships, but to grow wiser, stronger, and freer than ever before. Part 1. The silent power, when you choose silence instead of reacting. Do you know what drives a narcissist the most insane? It's not when you scream in their face. It's not when you call out every mistake and expose every manipulative trick. And it's not even when you cry begging for answers. All of those things are actually gifts to them, because to a narcissist, every emotional reaction you give is proof they still have power. A narcissist isn't looking for love in the way you understand it. They're looking for emotional fuel. Psychologists call it narcissistic supply. It's what keeps their fragile ego alive. A compliment, a hug, a look of admiration, those are supplies. But even anger, despair, or long paragraphs of accusations are still supplies. For them, as long as you react, it means they still exist in your world. And that's why silence is the one weapon they're never prepared to face. When you go silent, you step out of the role they scripted for you. They set the trap, but you don't walk into it. They throw the bait, but you don't take it. They try to drag you into their emotional chaos, but instead, you quietly step back. And in that moment, they don't just lose control, they lose the mirror that reflects the identity they built for themselves. Picture this, a shattered mirror. All this time, they've seen themselves in your eyes, as powerful, valuable, in control, but when you choose silence, the mirror vanishes. Where do they look now? There's no one left to reflect back the image they painted. They're forced to face the emptiness inside, the one thing they've spent their entire life avoiding. For you, silence may just feel like a choice to protect yourself, but for them, it's a psychological earthquake. It makes them feel like they're fading, like they're being erased from your world. And in the twisted reality of a narcissist, losing control over you means losing themselves. Many people leaving a toxic relationship think, I need to explain so they'll understand. I need to argue so they'll see my point. I need closure to end this properly. But the truth is, you don't need to do any of that. A narcissist will never understand. They don't want to understand. They just want to win. The more you argue, the deeper you fall into the game they're best at. The more you explain, the more weapons you hand them to twist the story. Silence is how you step out of the game altogether. Silence says, I'm not playing anymore, and that unspoken sentence is louder than any explanation. It shows you've risen above the cycle, no longer trapped in the script they wrote for you. The fascinating part is that when you choose silence, you're not just changing how you deal with them, you're changing yourself. You stop reacting out of instinct. You stop living in defense mode. You begin acting from a place of calm, clarity, and intention. And that's the clearest sign of emotional maturity, because the weak will always crave explanations, recognition, and reassurance. The strong know not everyone deserves a response. Think back for a moment. How many times have you argued, hoping they'd change, only to end in disappointment? How many times have you forgiven, only to have the cycle of manipulation start again? How many times have you thought, I just need to say this one last thing, I need to make it clear? But every word disappeared into a cold void. That's when you realize silence is the clearest answer of all. In that silence, you take back control, not control over them, but control over yourself. You stop letting your emotions be dictated by them. You choose peace over noise. You choose to step away instead of clinging. You choose freedom over the endless cycle. And for a narcissist, that is a devastating defeat. They can't handle the truth that you've slipped out of their grip. They can't accept that you've found a strength they cannot destroy. They can't survive the silence, because in that silence, the truth is louder than ever. They were never as powerful as they thought, and you were never as weak as they wanted you to believe. Part 2. The collapse of the false self. The first thing you need to understand is this: narcissists don't have a stable sense of self. They don't truly know who they are. They don't have a solid identity built from inner values, self-awareness, or self-respect. Instead, they live through mirrors, specifically the emotional reactions of you and everyone else around them. Every time you praise them, they feel valuable. Every time you get angry, they feel in control. Every time you come back after forgiving them, they believe they're invincible. That is the false self. A castle built on sand, forever dependent on others to hold it up, because inside of them there is nothing but emptiness. And then, when you go silent, when you stop reacting, when you're no longer their mirror, that fragile structure begins to collapse. Picture it this way: a narcissist is like an actor on stage. They only exist when there's an audience. They only feel important when others are clapping, cheering, or even booing. Without an audience, their play is meaningless, and when you, their main audience, quietly walk out of the theater, they fall into a vast emptiness, not knowing how to keep performing. At first, this collapse happens quietly. You won't see them fall apart right away. On the surface, they might even shine brighter. They post happy pictures on social media, smiling with someone new, writing captions full of positive energy. But don't be fooled. That's not freedom. That's panic in disguise. Inside, they're cracking. Without your reactions, they lose the supply that kept their fake self alive. The inner void they've always avoided starts to surface. Loneliness, anxiety, insecurity, and the fear of being forgotten. Every day you remain silent is another day they're forced to face the question they've always been terrified of. If no one reacts to me, who am I? This is a real crisis. You might not see it with your eyes, but it happens in the dark. Some narcissists start obsessively checking your posts, scrolling through your stories, desperately searching for any sign that you still care. They're addicted to your attention the way someone is addicted to a drug, and when you cut off the supply, they go through painful withdrawal. When they can't find proof, they move to the next stage, rewriting the story. They can't admit you left because they were toxic. So, to protect their false self, they twist the truth. They tell others you were too sensitive, too dramatic, not mature enough to be with them. They make you the problem while painting themselves as the victim or the winner. That's their defense mechanism. Because if they admitted the truth, that you left because they weren't healthy enough, the entire wall of their ego would crumble instantly, and that's something they can never bear. But here's the thing, no matter how much they twist the story, the truth still haunts them. The truth that you walked away, that you stayed silent, that you're no longer under their control. And to a narcissist, that's the same as losing themselves. You see, this collapse doesn't explode like a bomb. It's quiet, like a building rotting from within, bricks falling one by one, but eventually it all comes crashing down into ashes, and it all starts from one simple act. You chose silence. The best part? You don't need to stick around to watch it happen. You don't need to check if they're suffering or regretful, because the false self they built was never meant to last forever. Your silence simply cuts off the fuel, forcing it to fall faster. This is the paradox that leaves narcissists in despair. They need you to survive, but you no longer need them. They fear being forgotten while you find peace in forgetting. And as the two paths split apart, the truth becomes undeniable. Their false self has nowhere left to cling. Part 3. The last tactics to regain control. When a narcissist's false self begins to crack, they won't just sit back and let it collapse. No, they will fight. They'll reach for every last weapon they have to try to pull you back in, to test whether they still hold even the slightest bit of power over your emotions. And if you don't recognize these moves, you risk falling into the old cycle all over again. Let's call these attempts the last tactics. This is when they unleash everything, subtle or ridiculous, all with one purpose: to see if you'll still react. 1. Subtle check-ins. At first, they'll start gently. A short text, just wanted to make sure you're okay. A random like on an old post. A familiar song sent through social media. An old photo suddenly dropped into your chat. None of this is accidental. These are emotional hooks. They're testing you. If you reply, even with something simple, what they actually hear in their mind is, "I still have control." 2. When the bait fails, the image game. If your silence continues, they move into stage 2, fake happiness on display. Suddenly, they transform into the best version of themselves online, smiling, thriving, and full of energy. They post photos with someone new, grinning ear to ear. They write cryptic captions like, "Not everyone deserves my energy," or "Finally I can be myself." Don't be fooled. True happiness doesn't need to be broadcast. These are not signs of freedom, but signs of panic. A desperate performance meant as a message to you, "See, I'm better off without you." But underneath, it's proof your silence is rattling them. 3. When the image isn't enough, the smear campaign. Next, they may attack your reputation. They'll twist the story to mutual friends, painting you as the problem. "She's just too sensitive. Never appreciated anything I did." The goal isn't necessarily to destroy you. It's to protect themselves. It's their way of clinging to the illusion of control. By twisting the truth, they make you the villain and themselves the victim, or the hero. 4. The rebrand fake remorse. If neither bragging nor smearing works, they'll play their next card, pretend regret. They'll show up with sweet apologies, carefully crafted words that sound like they've finally realized their mistakes. They'll talk about change, about growth, about wanting to close the chapter peacefully. At first, you might think this is maturity, but it's not. It's the reboot of the cycle. If you let them back in, it goes straight back to manipulation, control, and hurt. 5. When all else fails, extremes. Finally, if every tactic fails, the narcissist may go to extremes. Some turn cold and cruel, punishing you for daring to stay silent. Others swing the opposite way, playing the victim, posting about their pain, even hinting that they're falling apart. Whether extreme coldness or extreme weakness, the purpose is the same: to drag you back through guilt, pity, or anger. All of these tactics have one thing in common: they don't come from love, but from fear of losing control. Every move is simply a test. Will you still react? If you react, the old cycle restarts. If you stay silent, they'll escalate until they have nothing left to cling to, and at that point they're forced to face the most terrifying truth of all: I've really lost this power. Remember this: you don't need to play their game anymore. You don't need to reply, defend yourself, or prove who's right or wrong, because your silence is already the clearest answer. And that is the one thing they can never endure. Part 4. When you grow while they stay stuck. After you choose silence, one truth becomes clear: you step onto a new level of maturity, while they remain stuck exactly where they've always been. You no longer need to shout to be heard or argue to prove you're right. You understand that not everyone has the capacity to accept the truth, and forcing it only hurts you more. From the moment of silence, you choose peace over noise. As you return to yourself, the narcissist drowns in the chaos they created. You begin seeking healing, journaling your thoughts, going to therapy, spending time with family, or simply learning to enjoy stillness. Every day you don't respond is another layer of emotional protection you build for yourself. Meanwhile, they chase new distractions: a shallow relationship, a surface-level achievement, a staged performance on social media, all just to avoid the emptiness inside they'll never dare face. That contrast exposes a brutal truth: you are growing, and they're still a child trapped in an adult's body. So many of their behaviors are no different from a toddler throwing tantrums for attention, sulking, demanding, controlling, and insisting that everything revolve around them. But you've stepped out of that game. You're no longer the unwilling parent in a relationship that was supposed to be equal. You don't have to soothe, explain, or hold up their fragile ego anymore. What they fear most is realizing you're not coming back so easily. Your silence is the unspoken declaration that you've changed. You're no longer swayed by baiting texts, empty promises, or staged apologies. You stand steady while they stumble. They can feel you've grown, even if they'll never admit it. And deep down, they know that once you've reached this point, you'll never go back to who you were before. The gap between you widens with every passing day. You move toward peace. They cling to drama. You build your worth from within. They still depend on others' eyes to feel alive. You choose freedom. They choose control. The paths split, and your silence becomes the boundary they cannot cross. For you, silence is liberation. For them, silence is a sentence. It reminds them they've lost power, that their game no longer works. And that's the real pain, not losing you, but losing their ability to control you. Part 5. True freedom. When silence becomes the final victory. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need an apology. You don't need them to admit their faults. And you don't need an audience to confirm that you were right. By choosing silence, you've already said it all. It isn't giving up. It's declaring that you no longer wish to play a game you were never meant to win in the first place. The narcissist may keep performing. They'll laugh and smile online, post happy pictures, and create an image that without you, they're more radiant than ever. But you know the truth. Those performances are nothing more than shields to cover up the panic inside. Truly happy people don't need to prove it to the world. Truly peaceful people don't need to shout to be noticed. Your silence takes away their greatest power, the power to define your emotions. In the past, a single text, a look, or a hollow promise was enough to pull you back into the old cycle. But now, your silence has built a wall they cannot break through. Each time they try to knock, only emptiness echoes back. And in that emptiness, they realize the painful truth. This time, they've truly lost you. While they unravel, you discover something you've long desired. Freedom. Freedom from psychological games. Freedom from living in constant defense mode. Freedom from the fear of sudden rage or punishing silence. You reclaim your space, your peaceful sleep, your genuine laughter. That's the greatest victory, not winning against them, but conquering the fear and dependency within yourself. The irony is, to a narcissist, your silence is never just silence. It's a carved message that you've escaped their control. They may mock you, dismiss you, or smear your name to others, but deep down, they know you've reached a level they'll never touch, the level of a calm, whole, and unshakable adult who refuses to be chained to toxic emotions. You don't need to watch them collapse to feel validated. You don't need their apology to know your worth. All you need is to keep moving forward, calmly and steadily. Every day you hold your silence is another day you reinforce your boundaries, nurture your dignity, and build a future free of old cycles. They fear nothing more than being forgotten, and you, at last, have learned how to forget. You don't need them to define who you are. You don't need them to prove you matter. And when you let go, when you choose not to look back, you reclaim the most precious gift of all, your life. For them, your silence is a crushing defeat, but for you, it's victory. Not a victory for anyone else to acknowledge, but a quiet, profound, permanent victory, a victory measured in peace, not arguments, a victory that lifts you out of the shadows of manipulation and into a new chapter, one where you live not to react, but to choose. Because in your silence, you're no longer a victim in their story. You've become the author of your own. And nothing destroys a narcissist's false self more than realizing that, for the first time, they no longer have any role in your script.